Every night, thousands of trucks vanish onto dark rural highways, and many never arrive on time. No headlines, no warnings. Just hours of silence, broken signals, and drivers stranded where help doesn't come. Why are major carriers quietly abandoning these routes after sunset? What's happening in the gaps between towns, towers, and patrol cars? And who decides which roads are too risky to touch after dark? The routes that go quiet after 10 p.m. A rural route does not announce itself as a different kind of road after dark. The signs stay reflective. The centerline stays painted. A dispatcher can still read the same mileage between towns. The change is in what stops being available. A shoulder that held a daytime breakdown becomes a narrow strip of gravel. A volunteer fire department becomes the nearest response for a long stretch. A tow truck becomes a number in a phone that may not answer at midnight. Federal crash summaries show why night hours get handled differently in trucking operations. In the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Large Truck and Bus Crash, Fax 2022, about 39% of fatal large truck crashes occurred at night, defined as 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and about 54% of fatal large truck crashes occurred in rural areas. NHTSA's Large Trucks 2022 data reports the same rural share for fatal crashes involving large trucks. Those figures do not explain a driver's decision on a single night, but they match how many carriers, owner-operators, and dispatchers treat certain stretches as conditional rather than routine. In winter states, the word conditional often becomes literal. Wyoming posts warnings that certain closures apply specifically to light, high-profile vehicles during extreme winds, and the state has operated wind-related restrictions for years. A Y.blowover safety brochure describes a long-running practice of closing highway sections to light, high-profile vehicles because of blowover risk. In July 2024, WY. also published guidance on new penalties for violating weight-based road closures tied to those wind restrictions, describing a misdemeanor and a $1,000 fine for willfully ignoring signs and warnings. Trade press coverage aimed at carriers and drivers framed the same issue as enforcement against trucks that go around closure gates or ignore posted restrictions. For a night dispatch, that kind of corridor becomes a moving target. Interstate 80 across southern Wyoming is a common example in driver discussions because the route is long, exposed, and commercially important. The decision is sometimes made hours earlier, when winds begin rising west of Laramie and visibility drops in open country. A carrier's after-dark plan can shift to a truck stop hold, a day cab relay, or a rescheduled appointment. On paper, the route is still the fastest line across the state. In practice, the problem is that a closure does not come with a safe, predictable place to wait. A ramp can fill with parked rigs. A shoulder can drift over. A gate can close behind a driver who has already committed to a segment. The chain law adds another layer. Wyoming's chain law is structured as Level 1 and Level 2, with Level 2 allowing restrictions to vehicles equipped with chains or all-wheel drive with appropriate tires, and specifying minimum chain placement for commercial vehicles under the Level 2 condition. WY.'s winter guidance explains that the restrictions are applied to specific highway sections when conditions warrant. Night matters because chain-up areas are harder to use safely when snow is blowing across the pavement, headlights are limited, and traffic speed varies. A driver can chain up correctly and still face a different risk. A sudden stop caused by a crash ahead, or a closure that arrives after the equipment is already on. Mountain passes create a separate category of routes that some dispatchers will not assign late unless there is no alternative. Colorado's US. 160 over. Wolf Creek Pass is a working freight corridor, but the grades and curves force strict speed management, especially on descent. On the 3rd of November 2025, the Durango Herald reported that a 2-3-year-old truck driver from New York died when the semi-truck he was driving went off the edge of Wolf Creek Pass on US 160 near mile marker, 161 north of Pagosa Springs, with Colorado State Patrol as the source. The fact pattern is familiar in mountain trucking: a heavy load, long downhill braking, and a narrow margin for correction. Farther west, US 550 between Ouray and Silverton carries tourist traffic in daylight and freight traffic in the gaps. The route includes Red Mountain Pass and the stretch commonly called the $1 Million Highway. It is rural in the operational sense that matters to trucking. limited pull-offs, steep drop-offs, and long rescue times when a vehicle leaves the roadway. In February 2024, the Colorado Sun reported that Colorado State Patrol investigated 143 crashes on US 550 from 2013 through 2023, including 8 fatalities and 38 injury crashes, concentrated on a 14-mile segment between mile markers 78 and 92. Those numbers do not require drama to be useful. They function as a simple measure of how often the road punishes small mistakes. The same year, CDOT issued a travel advisory about a closure on US 550 Red Mountain Pass for search and rescue operations on the 5th of August, 2025, advising motorists traveling between Ouray and Silverton to seek alternate routes. Local reporting that week described a fatal rollover that dropped hundreds of feet down the mountain and required extended rescue work. The details vary by incident, but the operational effect stays consistent for freight planners. A closure on a 2-lane pass does not detour easily. It converts a scheduled night delivery into a long wait with limited services and little room to stage equipment. Some routes get avoided after dark for reasons that are not weather or geometry. In rural sections of interstate corridors, the risk can come from isolated violence that is rare but not abstract. On the 1st of August 2024, WFMY News 2 reported that a truck driver was injured in a shooting on I-40 inches, Davie County, North Carolina, and that the suspect, John Franklin Barrow Jr., was identified by deputies and taken into custody. Other local coverage described the same incident as part of a broader sequence of gunfire in Mocksville that night, with the truck driver struck while traveling on the interstate. A single incident like that does not define an entire region, and most night runs do not involve anything similar. Dispatch decisions can still shift when the event becomes part of the practical record that drivers share. The change is usually quiet. A driver asks to fuel earlier and avoid a particular rest area. A carrier updates a preferred stop list. A night route is reassigned to daylight when possible, not as a statement, but as a routine reduction in exposure. In all 3 categories, wind corridors, mountain passes, and isolated crime, the refusal is often not a refusal of trucking itself. It is a refusal of uncertainty, stacked on top of distance. A rural highway at 2 a.m. can still be legal, open, and mapped. The practical question is how many layers of help exist if a steer tire blows, if ice builds invisibly on a shaded curve, or if a closure gate drops 5 miles ahead with nowhere safe to park. Operations managers sometimes describe this in neutral language, using terms like serviceability and recovery time. Drivers put it in simpler terms. A road doesn't have room. A stretch doesn't have lights. A pass doesn't have a second chance. Those phrases are not theories. They are field notes that match the record of closures, crash investigations, and the occasional police report that lands in a dispatcher's inbox before the next night run is assigned. The stretches where help stops answering. After dark, some rural highways do not become more dangerous in obvious ways. The pavement does not change. The lane markings remain visible. Speed limits stay the same. What changes is the reliability of everything that supports a truck once something goes wrong. Across large parts of the Midwest, Appalachia, and the Mountain West, emergency response systems are designed around small populations and long distances. County sheriff departments may cover hundreds of square miles with 2 or 3 deputies on night shift. Volunteer fire departments often operate with reduced staffing after midnight. Tow services rotate on-call schedules that may place the nearest heavy-duty wrecker more than an hour away. In Meigs County, Ohio, Sheriff's Office staffing records from 2022 show that overnight patrols were frequently limited to a single deputy for the entire county. Similar patterns appear in public budget documents from counties in West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and southern Missouri. These areas contain active freight corridors linking distribution hubs to regional warehouses. During daylight, response times average under 20 minutes. After midnight, they often exceed 45. Breakdowns expose this difference immediately. A mechanical failure on State Route 7 along the Ohio River, or on US 119 inches eastern Kentucky, may leave a driver waiting with limited phone signal and no nearby services. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration roadside inspection data shows that many out-of-service violations are resolved through roadside repair. At night, in rural areas, those repairs are frequently delayed until morning. Cellular coverage maps published by the FCC show large gaps in parts of Nevada, New Mexico, Arkansas, and West Virginia. On paper, these areas appear served. In practice, signal strength fluctuates. Truckers report frequent call drops along routes such as US 93 inches Nevada, US 64 inches New Mexico, and sections of US 50 inches Utah. When a truck loses power or strikes debris in these zones, contacting dispatch or emergency services becomes uncertain. Tow availability follows similar patterns. Heavy-duty recovery equipment is expensive to operate and maintain. Rural operators cannot justify maintaining multiple night crews. In many counties, only one wrecker is certified to handle loaded tractor-trailers. If that unit is already in use, response is delayed. Accident reports from state patrol agencies in Arkansas and Oklahoma between 2020 and 2023 document multiple incidents where disabled trucks remained on road shoulders for more than 6 hours awaiting recovery. Lighting is another factor that receives little public attention. Rural highways often lack continuous street lighting. This reduces maintenance costs but complicates nighttime stops. A driver pulling onto a narrow shoulder after a tire failure may be working in near-total darkness. State crash databases show that secondary collisions involving disabled commercial vehicles occur disproportionately at night on unlit rural roads. In January 2024, Missouri State Highway Patrol investigated a fatal collision on US 54 inches Miller County, involving a stopped tractor-trailer and a passenger vehicle. The truck had experienced mechanical trouble and was partially on the shoulder. The incident occurred shortly after 2 a.m. Investigators cited low visibility and delayed detection as contributing factors. Similar reports appear in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Rest areas and truck stops play a role in route avoidance. Many rural corridors have lost facilities over the past 2 decades. Rising land costs, environmental regulations, and declining fuel margins have led to closures. Between 2010 and 2023, the number of full-service truck stops along certain secondary highways in Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas declined significantly, according to state transportation planning documents. When facilities close, remaining locations become crowded. After midnight, parking fills quickly. Drivers who cannot find legal spaces are forced to continue farther than planned. Electronic logging device records reviewed in safety audits show repeated instances of drivers extending runs to reach open parking, sometimes adding 50 to 70 miles. Fatigue management becomes harder under these conditions. Federal hours of service rules require rest, but they do not guarantee places to rest. On routes such as US 412 inches, Oklahoma, or US 71 inches western Arkansas, safe overnight parking may be separated by more than 100 miles. Some carriers now prohibit night operation on these corridors unless guaranteed parking is available. Crime reports also influence decisions, though less consistently. In rural areas, thefts and assaults involving truckers are rare compared to urban freight hubs. When incidents occur, they are widely shared within driver networks. In 2023 and 2024, several shootings and robberies involving trucks on isolated interstate segments in North Carolina, Texas, and Louisiana were reported by local media. Dispatch offices responded by quietly adjusting routing preferences. Weather compounds existing limitations. Heavy rain in southern Appalachia frequently causes rock slides and washouts, flash flooding along US. And, quote, 90 inches. Texas and Louisiana has stranded overnight traffic multiple times in recent years. When these events occur at night, detours are harder to manage, and local authorities may not have updated information until morning. Insurance providers track these patterns. Risk assessments used by major underwriters include response time, infrastructure density, and historical closure data. Internal documents from fleet audits show that certain rural routes receive higher nighttime risk scores regardless of crash frequency. These scores affect premiums and route authorization. For drivers, the decision is usually framed in practical terms. A road with weak signal, limited towing, no lighting, and no parking becomes a liability after dark. The issue is not fear. It is predictability. Daylight compensates for missing infrastructure. Darkness removes that margin. As a result, refusal takes subtle forms. Loads are scheduled earlier, departures are delayed, routes are reassigned. Dispatchers mark corridors as daylight preferred. These changes accumulate slowly, guided by incident reports, delayed recoveries, and long nights spent waiting for help that arrived after sunrise. The detours that nobody advertises. On rural night routes, some of the most important changes are not posted on signs or included in navigation systems. They appear quietly in dispatch notes, handwritten driver logs, and informal routing rules that circulate within companies. These changes are rarely called detours. They are described as preferred alternates or temporary adjustments. Over time, many of them become permanent. In eastern Kentucky, freight once moved routinely along US 119 and Kentucky Route 80 during overnight hours. By 2023, several regional carriers had shifted much of that traffic to longer interstate paths through Tennessee. The reason was not congestion, it was infrastructure fatigue. Bridge inspections, lane narrowing, and recurring rockslide repairs had turned short routes into unpredictable ones after dark. State transportation records show that between 2016 and 2024, more than 30 weight-restricted bridges were posted along secondary highways in southeastern Kentucky and southern West Virginia. Many were built before 1960. Nighttime visibility around these structures is limited. Warning signs are sometimes placed only a few hundred feet in advance. Several crash investigations document trucks braking abruptly after discovering restrictions too late. Similar patterns appear in Northern California. Portions of State Route 36 and State Route 299 connect inland distribution centers to coastal ports. Both routes cross mountainous terrain and rely on aging pavement and drainage systems. Caltrans maintenance reports from 2020 to 2023 list repeated emergency repairs caused by erosion, frost damage, and slope failure. During daytime, flaggers and pilot cars manage traffic. At night, lanes may close with little advance notice. In March 2022, a loaded produce truck became stranded overnight on Route 299 near Burnt Ranch after encountering an unexpected single-lane closure. The driver remained stopped for nearly 5 hours until maintenance crews returned at sunrise. The incident did not appear in statewide statistics. It circulated instead through dispatch channels and industry newsletters. In the Midwest, county road agreements create another layer of uncertainty. Many rural highways rely on local governments for maintenance despite carrying interstate freight. Budget constraints affect snow removal, resurfacing, and lighting. Minnesota Department of Transportation audits show that several high-volume freight connectors in western counties receive winter service several hours later than primary highways. As a result, night drivers face uneven conditions within short distances. One stretch may be plowed and treated, the next may remain untreated until morning. In January 2024, Minnesota State Patrol responded to multiple overnight slide-offs involving trucks on State Highway 23 inches Kandiyohi County. Reports noted delayed snow removal and limited sanding. Navigation software rarely reflects these differences. Routing algorithms prioritize distance and posted limits. They do not account for maintenance schedules or local staffing levels. When a recommended route leads into poorly serviced territory at night, drivers must improvise. In Texas, secondary highways connecting the Permian Basin to rail hubs illustrate this problem. Routes such as US 180 and State Highway 18 carry heavy equipment and fuel loads. TxDOT maintenance records show recurring nighttime lane closures for pavement repairs between 2021 and 2024. Some closures were marked only with temporary cones and portable signs. Several trucking companies now require manual route approval for these corridors after sunset. Dispatch supervisors review planned paths and substitute longer interstate options when conditions are uncertain. These substitutions increase mileage but reduce overnight exposure. Flood-prone areas create another category of unofficial detours. In Louisiana, Mississippi, and southern Arkansas, minor highways cross low-lying terrain that floods repeatedly. Water may recede during daylight and return overnight. Sensors are limited. Warning systems depend on local reports. In April 2023, a tanker truck became trapped overnight on Louisiana Highway, 10 inches Street, Helena Parish, after floodwater rose unexpectedly. Parish emergency logs show that the driver was unaware of the closure ahead and had no safe turnaround point. Recovery was delayed until daylight. Mountain regions present different challenges. In northern Idaho and western Montana, Forest Service roads and state highways often intersect. During fire season, emergency access rules change rapidly. Overnight restrictions may not appear on public maps. In August 2022, a logging truck operating under contract was redirected onto an unmaintained segment near Lolo Pass after encountering a nighttime wildfire closure. The route was technically open but unsuitable for heavy equipment. The truck sustained suspension damage and required recovery at dawn. These events accumulate quietly. Each one adds a note to a routing database or a dispatcher's memory. Over time, certain highways are flagged internally as day-only or weather-dependent. These labels are not visible to outsiders. They shape how freight actually moves. Insurance reviews reinforce this process. Loss control assessments conducted for carriers in 2022 and 2023 identified route volatility as a risk factor. Corridors with frequent temporary closures, unplanned maintenance, or inconsistent enforcement received higher exposure ratings. Some underwriters now require documentation of alternate routes for specific rural lanes. Driver experience fills gaps left by official data. Many maintain personal notebooks or digital files, listing locations where closures appear without warning, shoulders disappear, or signage is unreliable. These records are shared informally through training sessions and private messaging groups. In Oklahoma and western Arkansas, for example, several carriers distribute internal maps highlighting overnight caution zones along US 59 and US 71. These zones reflect years of minor incidents, stalled vehicles, and delayed recoveries that never reach national databases. Public freight plans rarely capture this layer. State reports focus on capacity, tonnage, and pavement condition. They do not track how often a route becomes temporarily unusable at night. Yet for operators, that usability matters more than theoretical efficiency. As a result, refusal takes the form of quiet rerouting. Trucks bypass shorter roads, schedules favor daylight, mileage increases without explanation on invoices, customers see later delivery windows. The underlying cause is a network of unofficial detours shaped by maintenance cycles, local budgets, and repeated overnight disruptions. These detours are not permanent on maps. They exist in practice. They determine which roads remain active after sunset and which become conditional pathways used only when circumstances are favorable, the files that decide which roads survive the night. During the day, rural highways are judged by what can be seen. Traffic moves, crews work, fuel stations operate, dispatch centers answer calls, public reports show steady performance. On paper, most secondary routes appear reliable. After midnight, a different record begins forming. It is created quietly inside trucking companies. It appears in maintenance notes, dispatch journals, insurance summaries, and customer service logs. No single entry seems important. A delayed tow, a missed scan, a late appointment, a stalled repair, a lost signal, a rerouted load. Over months and years, these entries accumulate. They begin to describe roads in ways that maps do not. In western Kansas, several regional carriers reviewed 5 years of overnight operations in 2023. The review compared planned travel time with actual movement. Certain state highways showed consistent gaps of 2 to 4 hours between expectation and reality. No major crashes explained the difference. The delays came from minor failures that took too long to resolve after dark. A pressure sensor warning might force a stop. A trailer light malfunction might require inspection. A refrigeration unit might reset incorrectly. None of these problems normally end a trip. On isolated routes at night, they often do. Service records from eastern Colorado and Nebraska show that roadside repairs performed between midnight and 5 a.m. require, on average, twice the travel time of daytime calls. Many technicians are on rotating duty. Some cover 3 counties alone. Parts warehouses are closed. Authorization offices operate with reduced staff. Each delay extends the stop. While a truck sits, other systems begin to drift. Electronic logs approach limits. Customer delivery windows tighten. Dispatch schedules unravel. Replacement equipment is unavailable. Insurance exposure increases. None of this is dramatic. It is expensive. In 2021, a Midwest carrier documented a routine breakdown on US 36 inches north-central Missouri. A coolant hose failed at 1:12 a.m. The repair itself required 40 minutes. The technician arrived at 4:47 a.m. The truck missed 2 delivery appointments. A substitute load had to be arranged. The total cost exceeded $12,000. No accident occurred. No report was filed. The route was later reclassified for daylight use. Incidents like this rarely reach regulators or media outlets. They circulate internally. Dispatch offices maintain overnight incident binders. These are digital now, but the purpose is the same. They record when calls were received, when help was contacted, when assistance arrived, and when the truck resumed movement. Over time, these binders reveal geographic patterns. In parts of southern Indiana and western Kentucky, incident logs from 2019 to 2022 show clusters of overnight delays linked to limited towing coverage. One operator served multiple counties. When occupied, all other incidents waited. Carriers adjusted schedules. Eventually, several stopped routing night freight through those zones. Insurance analysts study similar data. Claim files include timelines: how long a vehicle was exposed, how long cargo remained unsecured, how long traffic was obstructed. Rural overnight incidents consistently show longer exposure periods than comparable daytime events. Longer exposure increases liability. A stopped truck becomes a hazard, a refrigerated load becomes vulnerable, a disabled trailer becomes a target for theft, a driver becomes responsible for conditions beyond control. In Texas and New Mexico, underwriters reviewing 2022 loss histories identified several rural corridors where small incidents produced unusually large claims. The roads were not unsafe. The response environment was slow. Policies were adjusted. Premiums rose. Routing changed. Customer records reflect the same process. Shippers track on-time performance by lane. When a rural night segment repeatedly generates late deliveries, the lane is flagged. Brokers reduce volume. Penalty clauses are enforced. Carriers shift capacity. Between 2020 and 2023, brokerage firms operating in the Plains region documented rising service failures on certain overnight agricultural routes. The failures were tied to delayed recoveries, closed facilities, and extended idle times. Over time, these lanes were moved to daylight schedules. Drivers experienced these patterns directly. In training sessions and informal meetings, experienced drivers often reference specific locations: a bridge outside Hayes, a curve near Mountain Home, a stretch past Clarksdale. These are not dangerous in themselves. They are places where problems tend to last. A truck might wait 6 hours for a tow. A driver might spend a night without information. A load might miss a connection. These experiences shape preferences. Assignment requests change. Dispatchers respond. The offices that go quiet before the roads do. In most trucking companies, the transition to night operations happens gradually. Office lights are turned off one section at a time. Phones stop ringing as frequently. Email traffic slows. Supervisors leave. Support departments close. By midnight, the structure that manages daytime freight has narrowed to a small group of people and a set of automated systems. The trucks remain on the road. During business hours, a driver with a problem enters a layered network. A dispatcher answers. A maintenance desk coordinates repairs. A safety officer reviews alerts. A compliance specialist prepares documentation. A customer service agent contacts the shipper. Each task is handled by a different person. Information moves across departments. After midnight, that structure compresses. Staffing schedules from regional and mid-sized carriers show that overnight shifts are often handled by one operations supervisor and one assistant. In some companies, a single person monitors all active vehicles across several states. Call logs from 2022 and 2023 show that night, supervisors routinely manage routing changes, breakdown coordination, regulatory questions, and customer updates at the same time. Most nights are quiet, some are not. When multiple incidents occur in rural areas, response slows. A breakdown in western Nebraska, a weather closure in eastern Wyoming, a late delivery in southern Missouri, a driver stopped for inspection in Arkansas. Each requires attention. None can be resolved quickly. Internal operations reviews show that during these periods, rural incidents are often addressed last, not because they are less serious, because they involve longer chains of communication. A disabled truck near a city can be connected to a repair provider in minutes. A disabled truck on US 83 inches northern Kansas may require multiple calls to locate an available wrecker, confirm travel distance and secure authorization. While this occurs, other requests wait. Maintenance coordination illustrates the problem clearly. Most carriers rely on national repair networks. These networks promise coverage but not uniform availability. Vendor directories list providers by region. Overnight coverage is uneven. Some counties have no certified heavy-duty technicians on night duty. Vendor performance reports from 2021 to 2023 show that response times in rural zones after midnight frequently exceeded 4 hours. Waivers were issued, penalties were waived. These delays became accepted. Dispatchers adjusted expectations. Drivers were told to prepare for extended stops. Safety departments followed similar patterns. Modern trucks generate continuous alerts, brake wear, engine faults, stability warnings, tire pressure drops. During the day, these alerts trigger immediate review. At night, staffing limits slow evaluation. Internal safety memos from several carriers note that non-critical alerts reported overnight are often monitored until morning, rather than addressed immediately. The risk of moving is weighed against the risk of stopping without support. In some cases, drivers are instructed to hold position. This increases downtime. Compliance operations experience parallel constraints. Hours of service corrections, inspection reports, and incident filings are normally processed quickly. At night, documentation accumulates. Files are completed later. Supporting materials are gathered after delays. Audit records from 2020 to 2022 show that rural overnight incidents produced higher volumes of follow-up requests from regulators. Information gaps had to be filled days later. Administrative burden increased. Customer communication becomes more fragile. Many freight contracts require prompt notification of delays. During the day, customer service teams handle these calls. At night, updates rely on dispatch staff. Brokerage records from 2021 show that customers often learned of rural overnight disruptions through tracking systems before receiving confirmation from carriers. Complaints focused on uncertainty rather than lateness. The lack of verified information created tension. Legal and insurance departments were affected indirectly. When incidents occurred overnight, evidence collection was delayed. Photos were taken hours later. Witnesses had dispersed. Road conditions had changed. Documentation was incomplete. Claim files from rural night incidents show higher dispute rates than daytime cases. Responsibility was harder to establish. Settlement times lengthened. Legal costs increased. Over time, risk managers noted the trend. Human resources data added another layer. Night operations positions have higher turnover than daytime roles. Job descriptions combine technical, regulatory, and crisis management responsibilities. Training requires months. Replacements often learn under pressure. During staffing transitions in 2022 and 2023, several carriers recorded spikes in unresolved overnight incidents. Rural routes were most affected. They required more coordination than new staff could provide. Technology was expected to reduce dependence on human support. Fleet software integrates weather data, traffic reports, and maintenance alerts. Predictive models estimate failure risk. Automated routing suggests alternatives. System logs from major providers show that these tools perform well in stable environments. During rural night disruptions, human overrides increase. Algorithms cannot determine whether a tow truck is actually available or whether a county road is passable. Human judgment remains necessary, but it is limited. Public emergency services mirror these constraints. County dispatch centers operate with reduced personnel overnight. Mutual aid agreements exist but take time to activate. Volunteer responders travel from home. Incident reports from West Virginia, Idaho, and Arkansas show that commercial vehicle emergencies at night required longer coordination periods than daytime equivalents. Response delays were not attributed to neglect. They reflected staffing realities. Drivers experience these limitations directly. Call attempts go to voicemail. Messages are returned slowly. Estimates change. Instructions are cautious. Assistance is distant. Training materials have adapted. Recent driver manuals include sections on overnight self-management, securing scenes, conserving fuel, preparing for extended isolation, documenting conditions independently. Earlier editions did not emphasize these skills. Insurance auditors have incorporated support capacity into evaluations. Risk assessments from 2023 reference overnight response density and vendor accessibility. Routes with limited support receive higher exposure ratings regardless of crash history. Financial departments integrate the same data. Cost analyses show that rural night incidents generate higher indirect expenses than daytime equivalents. Administrative labor, overtime, equipment idle time, contract penalties, legal review. Management responds. Some companies expand night staffing, many do not. Instead, they reduce exposure. The road does not change, the network behind it does. When offices go quiet before the roads do, problems travel farther before being resolved. Small delays stretch, minor faults expand, information moves slowly. Over time, this environment reshapes routing decisions. The nights when the network breaks apart. In most parts of the country, freight movement depends less on roads than on coordination. Trucks move because dispatchers are available, repair crews are on call, customers can be updated, insurance coverage is active, and local authorities respond when needed. During the day, these systems overlap and reinforce each other. When one part slows, another compensates. Problems are absorbed before they grow. After dark on many rural routes, that balance changes. Between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., staffing levels drop across nearly every institution connected to trucking. Dispatch centers reduce personnel, maintenance offices close, vendor call centers operate with skeleton crews, county agencies switch to minimum coverage. Volunteer responders return home. Even large carriers rely on automated monitoring during these hours. The network remains in place, but it becomes thin. When a truck moves through this environment, it is operating with fewer layers of support. If nothing goes wrong, the difference is invisible. A load travels normally, a driver reaches the destination. No record reflects the vulnerability of the system, but when a minor disruption occurs, the limits become clear. A sensor fault forces a stop, a tire strikes debris, a refrigeration unit shuts down, a trailer light fails inspection, a weather alert triggers a delay. None of these problems is unusual. All of them occur daily across the country. The difference is how they are handled. During daylight, these events trigger simultaneous responses. Dispatch contacts maintenance, maintenance contacts vendors, customer service informs the shipper, safety officers review compliance. Repairs are authorized quickly, the truck moves again. At night in rural regions, these steps rarely happen together. Dispatch may be managing dozens of vehicles alone. Maintenance managers may be unreachable. Vendors may have no technician available. Law enforcement may be covering multiple counties. Authorization may require approval from someone who is off duty. Each step waits for the previous one to finish. Time accumulates. Internal carrier records from 2020 to 2024 show that rural nighttime incidents routinely require 2 to 3 times longer to resolve than comparable daytime events. These records do not describe major accidents. They describe ordinary failures that became extended immobilizations. The problem is not severity, it is isolation. While a truck waits, consequences multiply. Driver hours approach legal limits, loads miss connections, replacement equipment becomes unavailable, detention fees apply, insurance exposure increases, customers lose confidence. None of these effects appears in crash reports. All of them appear in financial statements. Accounting departments notice first. When cost per mile reports are reviewed, certain lanes show persistent nighttime inefficiency. The extra costs are scattered across categories: labor, claims, penalties, downtime, administration. No single line item seems responsible. Together, they change margins. Routing software incorporates these outcomes automatically. Modern systems evaluate historical performance when recommending routes. Corridors that generate repeated overnight exceptions receive lower reliability scores. They are still available, but they are ranked below alternatives. Dispatchers follow the recommendations. Traffic shifts quietly. Insurance underwriters reach similar conclusions. Claim files involving rural overnight incidents remain open longer. They require more documentation. They involve more parties. They cost more to manage. Premium adjustments follow. Risk classifications change. Exposure limits tighten. Customer contracts reflect the same patterns. Shippers monitor delivery variance closely. Routes that produce unpredictable overnight delays lose preferred status. Penalties increase. Volumes decline. Daytime windows replace night schedules. Drivers adapt as well. Assignment records show that experienced drivers gradually avoid high uncertainty night routes. They request different lanes. They seek earlier departures. They bid on alternative runs. Dispatchers respond when possible. Newer drivers fill the gaps. Incident rates rise. Training costs increase. Management intervenes. Human resources departments document the effects. Exit interviews frequently reference long waits, lack of support, and repeated overnight disruptions. These comments are summarized in retention reports. Leadership reviews them. Restrictions follow. Legal departments add another layer of caution. Rural night incidents often lead to complex liability cases. Evidence is delayed. Witnesses are unavailable. Conditions change before documentation occurs. Disputes are harder to resolve. Litigation lasts longer. Reserves increase. Counsel advises limiting exposure. Technology does not eliminate these pressures. Telematics systems, predictive maintenance tools, and routing algorithms improve baseline efficiency. They do not replace human coordination when systems fail. Software cannot confirm whether a tow truck will arrive at 3 a.m. It cannot negotiate access to closed facilities. It cannot resolve jurisdictional boundaries. It can only record delay. Those records accumulate. Over years, carriers build internal performance maps that differ from public ones. Some corridors are labeled preferred. Others are marked conditional. Some become daylight only. These classifications are invisible outside the industry. They shape bids, schedules, and staffing plans. Public agencies rarely see this transformation. Traffic counts decline slowly. Crash rates remain stable. Pavement conditions are unchanged. From a planning perspective, the network appears healthy. Inside the industry, it is being reorganized. Local communities feel indirect effects. Overnight, fuel sales fall. Repair shops reduce on-call staff. Convenience stores shorten hours. Law enforcement adjusts patrol patterns. Volunteer departments scale back readiness. Support capacity weakens further. Avoidance becomes self-reinforcing. In rare cases, coordinated investment reverses the trend. Expanded truck parking, improved broadband, guaranteed repair contracts, and increased night staffing can restore reliability. Carriers respond. Scores improve. Volume returns. These examples are uncommon because they require sustained cooperation across agencies and industries. More often, the shift becomes permanent. The title of this series asks why rural truckers are refusing certain routes after dark. The answer is not fear, rumor, or isolated danger. It is systemic. It is built from thousands of nights when small problems took too long to solve. It is written in maintenance invoices, call logs, audit files, claim summaries, and scheduling reports. It is reinforced by software, insurance tables, and contract terms. The roads do not close. They lose support. When the network breaks apart after midnight, freight becomes harder to manage. Costs rise. Reliability falls. Alternatives become preferable. Traffic migrates. Quietly. Without announcements, without headlines, what remains is a map that looks complete and a system that is no longer evenly connected. Some highways continue to function at night because the surrounding network is strong. Others remain open but unsupported. In modern logistics, that difference is decisive. It determines which routes survive the night. If this video gets your interest, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what topics you want us to uncover next. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.